Hi everyone, this is Lauren Braille with my Week 8 data analysis. So I am using Reflex to go on and give you my data analysis. Reflex is going to be the dashboard that I use for my research project, and I thought it would be great to kind of take a look at where my students are because we have started using Reflex to get them used to it so that they are going on every day, and the goal is for them to be getting their green light. So I have a couple different options here. This is my Reflex dashboard. I'm not going to click on it up here just because it's going to end up showing individual student names, and I don't want to do that because of privacy concerns. So I would normally click here. I'd go into my class from this year, which is Braille 21-22, and I can actually look at my data from last year as well, my last year students. So I have a couple different options. I can go into group status, which I'm not going to click right now, because that will show you individual students. I have a usage summary, so I can go in and see. I'm going to actually click on that. I can go in and see, and it will give me this graph here of students that are using Reflex 3+ more days per week and the optimal usage. There is only 15 students in my class. It does say 17, but I had 2 students that moved out, so I do currently have 15. The one student up here that's poor usage is my student that is no longer with me. She started the year with me, but then she ended up leaving. So that's why that student is there. So my students are using Reflex every day, and their goal again is to go on and complete their green light. So now I'm going to go under my fluency growth, which is the tab I was originally at. I do have my individual reports over here too that I can go in and look at individual students. But again, for this part, I am not going to do that since it's got my individual students' names. So I am going to go under and analyze the data for my group for how my students are doing currently. So here in orange, it says starting fluency. So at the beginning of Reflex, 19.6% of the whole class average was fluent. So they knew 19.6% of their facts. Reflex, the current assignment that I have my students doing in 2nd grade is 0 through 10, addition and subtraction. Currently, right now, the current fluency of the group average is 51.6%. So looking at those numbers, I was able to determine that fluency has gone up from the beginning of the year, which is great because students are going on every day and practicing. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to see increasing as the year goes on, and especially with the goal setting progress that I plan to put in place. Over here is our group fluency distribution. So starting fluency, so 14 students were at that 0 to 49% fluent rate. I had one student who was at the 80 to 94% fluent rate when they started the year. So this was Reflex goes on and gives them an individual test to kind of see where they're at. And one student, when they did this assessment, they were at that 80 to 94% range. And then I also had one student that was 95 to 100% fluent. I actually had 2 students, and these are the 2 students that had used Reflex the year before in 1st grade. They were a little more advanced with math, so then their 1st grade teacher had already set them up with Reflex, and those were my 2 students that had already been using Reflex, and they kind of already had knowledge of it, and they had already been pretty fluent with their facts. Right now, here is my current fluency for my class. So I have 8 students right now that are at that 0 to 49%. I have 5 students that are the 50 to 79% fluent, and I have 3 students now at that 95 through the 100% range. So just looking at that graph, I had over half of my class at that 0 to 49% fluent, and right now I have half of my class at that 0 to 49% fluency. So what I'm seeing is that at the beginning of the year, most of my students were not fluent in their facts. But now at this point in the year, I have over half of my class are becoming more fluent. They're getting better at their addition and subtraction facts, where I have 8 students that I'm still a little concerned about that I'm continuing to practice their facts with during different times during the day. I'm having them practice their facts at home too. So that's just some things that I'm seeing with the starting fluency to the current fluency. Down here, this group fluency histogram breaks it down even more. So the orange was the starting fluency and the green is the current fluency right now. So looking at this graph, at the beginning of the year, I had most of my students down here at the percentage fluency of fluent facts from the 0 to about 35%. I did have one student at that starting percent of, actually I had two, at one at the 90 to 95 and one at the 95 to 100, like you saw up here in this graph. But then down here, it breaks it down even more so that you can see the students that were in the red here, kind of where they were spread out. So this histogram really breaks it down for me so that I can see, okay, I have 4 students at that 0 to 5 starting fluency. I had 4 students at 5 to 10, 3 students at 10 to 15, 1 student at 15 to 20%. So at the beginning of the year, most of my students were in this section of the graph. Now that we've been practicing with reflex and practicing our addition and subtraction facts, I'm seeing a more evenly spread. I do see one student down here at that 5 to 10%, so that is telling me that I need to work with that student more on mastering his or her addition and subtraction facts so that they're practicing that more. Whereas this student up here, actually those 3 students might be ready to move on from addition and subtraction if they keep at that. So something we do in my school with reflex is moving them onto multiplication and division. Once they've kept that 100% for a couple weeks, they've been pretty fluent at that 100%. They know their facts. So then that's something that I may move those 3 students on from reflex, from addition and subtraction to multiplication and division. So I may end up adding that into my action research project since they're already pretty fluent with their facts. And again, like I said, I had 2 students that used reflex in first grade and they were pretty high and pretty fluent with that. So I may end up switching their assignment. And then down here, the last one I wanted to show you is this group fluency timeline. And it started when we started using reflex, so September 1st up until today, October 12th. And this line has showed me that students are making fact fluency progress. So their progress is increasing, which is great. I love to see that. Something that would worry me if I saw this chart would be that if like here at the beginning of the year was when they kind of stayed at a steady rate, they weren't really growing. Whereas now, so starting on September 12th, all the way up until today, it's kind of been a steady incline where it's grown. Maybe it stayed at the same for a little bit, but then it was growing. So that's something I definitely want to continue to see. If I start to see this line start going down or kind of starting to plateau like it did here at the beginning of the year, that's definitely something that's going to alert me. I will want to check in with my students, kind of see what might be happening with them, might check in to see if something's happening with my teaching where they're not continuing to go upwards, they start going down or plateauing. So that would be something that would alert me. But looking at this data now, it shows me that everything is going well, it's going smoothly, students are increasing with their fact fluency. So as you can see, my data has been showing me so far from the beginning of the year to currently where I am now that students are progressing on their fact fluency, which is something that I definitely wanted to look at and make sure that students are progressing and going in that right direction of learning their facts and becoming 100% fluent. That is the goal for second grade, that they become 100% fluent with their addition and subtraction facts. I am excited to continue to analyze this data and start to implement my goal setting process with my action research with my students and take a look and see how that affects this data that Reflex has been collecting for me, and to be able to look at it with this new lens and see if it positively impacts my students' fact fluency and continues that trend upward. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing everybody else's posts from this week.